Welcome to our webinar on financial literacy. My name is Chris Punongbayan, and I have the honor and privilege of working for ChangeLawyers. Our mission is to build a better justice system for all Californians and empower the next generation of legal change makers. This is the first in a series of webinars that we are launching in 2020 to help create the conditions of success for both attorneys and law students, especially those whose experiences are shaped by their identities as LGBTQ and non-binary folks, women, and people of color. We are hoping to provide you all with the essential tools that will help empower you to succeed in law and in life, because in fact, we can't wait for others to do so. Sometimes we need to create the conditions ourselves that will lay the path for our own success. And that's what ChangeLawyers is here to do for all of you. Our format today will be hearing about the importance of financial literacy from a personal point of view from Helena Soa, a ChangeLawyers scholarship alumni. And then we will have a presentation from our guest speaker, Miguel Delgado. We'll leave about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. Please note that you can ask your questions at any time by typing in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And note that questions can only be posed in that way. So please do let us know what's on your mind. And for your information, this webinar is being recorded. So I'd like to introduce Helena. Helena was born in the Bronx, and her vision for the future is to live in an equitable society for women and minorities. She wishes to use her law degree to support the untapped potential of entrepreneurs in underrepresented communities. Helena draws her inspiration from personal experiences that included spending part of her childhood living in Ghana. Helena is pursuing her JD at UC Hastings College of Law and is a ChangeLawyers Scholarship alumni. Helena?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So before I begin, I want to mention that this is one of the very first projects of the California ChangeLawyers Leadership Council. It's a new group with the special purpose to guide and inform ChangeLawyers working in 2020 and beyond. This council currently is open to people who have received scholarships and fellowships from the California ChangeLawyers. So if you're interested in joining the council, we're having a call right after this webinar. So please feel free to join us. So I'm here today to share a little bit about my journey to law school and some of the struggles that I had with financial literacy. So I worked before I came to law school. And, I thought I was doing pretty well. I saved up money and I used the money wisely, as I thought anyway. And when I was coming to law school, I decided, okay, I'm going to use my savings to move here to California. That's going to help me when I'm getting my apartment and all of the essentials. But quickly, my savings ran out. And unfortunately, my first year and some of my second year of law school, I had to deal with a lot of medical issues. And so I used a lot of my California ChangeLawyers scholarship towards dealing with medical bills. And quite frankly, this was my first time dealing with the health system because, under the Obama law, you could have your parents' insurance until you were 26. So really, I hadn't dealt with insurance and medical bills before until I came to law school. And things I feel like quickly got out of hand with the bills because I realized that there was a 10% copay. And so every time I got admitted into the hospital or every time I need to see a doctor, then the bills would just keep piling on. And it became kind of frustrating because you realize that while all of this is going on in your personal life, you also need to start searching for a job and you're hoping that you can get a paid job. But if you are unfortunate to get a paid job, then you're most likely going to have to get an unpaid job, which then leaves you in a position of struggle because you have to pay for your apartment. You need to pay for your bills still. And it was something that I had discussed with Chris about that. Unfortunately, it seems that if you want to do good in our community, in our legal community. It seems that that has been an opportunity afforded to people who had the financial means. And if you didn't, then you had to force yourself to find a paid job, even if that's not necessarily the kind of job that you wanted. Because once you're finished with school, which ends in May, you have to figure out how to pay your rent for 3 months. And so my first year, I realized, like, wow, okay, I need to find a paid job. And I don't think it was something that was stressed upon at school, that you need the paid job because you won't get financial aid. And if you wanted financial aid, then you had to take a class on top of working a 40-hour job. So this was something that I realized I didn't know how to handle finances in this system, in this way. I didn't necessarily have a good plan coming in. I think I made a lot of assumptions as a student that, hey, I'm in school, so I should get financial aid and I should be covered. It just was a back burner thought. But thankfully, I mean, I was able to find a paying job, and I used that to cover my bills throughout the summer. Um, but moving forward, I realized, okay, but everything that you're getting, you're using that to pay bills. So how do you help yourself um, out of the struggle of constantly living paycheck to paycheck, essentially? And so, you know, I think financial literacy is really important for students, especially law students, because leaving, sometimes you think that, okay, I'm coming to law school and I'm dealing with law school tuition, but there's so many things that can happen to you outside of law school. And if you don't necessarily have a plan, you can quickly go under. And I can see how people would then maybe have to leave school if they can't figure out a plan to cover medical bills, to cover any personal issues. And I would say I've been very fortunate that I've had support systems in place to help me along the way, but it definitely is a struggle. And I'm really glad that we're doing this financial literacy course so that I can, you know, learn how to manage my funds better, and just dealing with life along with being a law student.
So we're so grateful that you're able to share your story, Helena, as a panelist, and now you can shift gears and be a participant and learn from Miguel as well. So really, thank you again for sharing your story. The struggle of financial literacy for people of color, LGBT folks, is real, and I'm very excited to have an expert with us to help us walk through some very important considerations as we're thinking about increasing our literacy. Miguel Delgado started his career in financial services in December 2006 and worked full-time to pay for his college education. He graduated from Cal State University East Bay and became a financial planning. He started a financial planning practice with David White and Associates in the summer of 2012. He later became a certified financial planner, practitioner, and partner of his firm. Most of his time is spent consumed with financial planning and investment management, so I can think of no one better to lead us through this next section. So Miguel, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I am a certified financial planner, and like Chris said, it is my job to help people and businesses optimize their finances through a process that I call, it's called financial planning. I cover a broad range of topics in finances, but today I'm here to talk to all of you about finances. And I'm told that this is a diverse group of lawyers, and there's been a lot of interest in this area. And I also want to thank Helena for sharing her story. I think hopefully what I have prepared today for all of you is relevant to all. I was looking through some of the comments, and it seems like we have people who are still in school, just graduated, somebody who's 30 years in law. So my name is Miguel Delgado, and I'll be speaking for about 35, 40 minutes. And we're going to cover a lot of information today. It's going to be quick. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, as Chris said, o'clock. So just make sure you type in your questions in the chat box so we can answer them at the end of the presentation. My goal for all of you is that you walk away with just one idea. If you could take one idea from today's conversation, then I feel like I would have done my job. And I'd be pretty happy about that. And lastly, if there's a topic after today that you feel like you would have wished I spent more time on, let Chris know and the other staff. I'd be happy to come back at a later point in time and dive into one of those topics that you wanted to hear more about. Okay? So without further ado, let's move. A quick disclosure. So as Chris mentioned, I am with David White & Associates. My broker-dealer is Emeritus Investment Company, LLC, and I do offer fee-based advisory services through Emeritus Advisory Services, all of whom are not affiliated. We're going to cover 5 topics today. Cash flow management. So cash flow is really the movement of your money in your life. Money comes in, money goes out. Money comes in again, and money comes out again. We'll talk about some of the things that you should be doing to control your money so that it starts to do what you want it to do. We're going to also talk about debt management. Managing debt is important if you want to be able to pay it down quickly and avoid it piling up in the future. I'll show you guys a couple of tricks that we can use to pay off debt faster, a lot faster than you might think you can, and how to avoid you having the debt pile up over time. We'll talk about some important employer benefits that you should be considering to help you save money in taxes, protect your family, and set yourself up for a successful future. And then there's a lot of benefits through the CalBar Connect. We'll talk about some of those. And lastly, we'll talk a little bit about financial planning. And I'm doing this because as a minority, this really wasn't an option for my family growing up. My parents are both immigrants. They didn't have a full education. They had no clue what a financial planner was or did, or that they even existed, let alone what a 401k was. They didn't have access to them. So yeah, I think it's important for people in our community, our diverse community, to know what financial planning is for now or future reference. So cash flow management really starts with having a deep fundamental understanding of your budget. So save first and spend later. So we want to develop a budget with fixed expenses and variable expenses. Fixed expenses are things like your rent, your insurance, and membership dues. These are types of expenses that don't change very much. Variable expenses are the kinds that they tend to change over time. So these are like your energy bill, groceries, gas, shopping, etc. So what I want you to do is make a list, if you haven't done so already, to create a budget. Have a list of what your fixed expenses are and your variable expenses. Most people are really shocked by the amount of expenses that they actually have, or how much they spend on a specific category like shopping or coffee. So you want to look at the last couple of months of transactions in your bank account and then start budgeting out, how much am I spending on this on average? How much am I spending on that on average? You're going to find that the fixed expenses don't change very much and the variable ones do. Most people live their lives paying for things first. So what I mean by say first, spend later, people a lot of times do the opposite. They pay their rent, they pay their bills, they do shopping, and then at the end of the month, they really try to save whatever's left over. But a lot of times, there's really not much left. And the answer is because they don't really have a fundamental understanding on how the budgeting works, and they're not saving first. Then there's other people who commit to saving first, and as soon as they get paid, they set aside money for savings, taxes, and investments, and then they spend what's left over. They pay their bills, they go shopping with whatever's left over, but they've paid themselves first. They've set the money aside into a savings account first. And in order for them to do that, they have to have a high awareness of what their expenses are, and of course, discipline and control. Experienced savers learn to keep things simple and they live frugally. That way they don't really have to spend a lot of time calculating what the next couple of months of expenses are going to look like. In some cases, people really need to make sacrifices in order to cut down their expenses. So some of these sacrifices and things and some tips that you can do to help control your spending. First thing is try to spend less than 30% on housing. So let's say you make $4,000 per month after taxes. That's your net income, $4,000. What this means is that you should really try to put yourself in a situation where your housing expenses are $1,200 or less. I know that sounds really difficult to do today and age, especially in California, especially in the Bay Area. But, you know, maybe you can have a roommate or a housemate or literally a roommate. If you're in law school, consider maybe sharing your room. There are sacrifices that you can make to lower your expenses. So that's one thing you can do. You should mind the small expenses. So how many times do you hear this familiar voice in your head that begins a sentence like this? Oh, it only costs blank. It only costs $5. It only costs $10. It only costs $20. Maybe you're on Instagram and you see an ad of something you like, and for some reason you think you need it. You go to the website, you're hoping that it's out of your budget so you don't have to buy it. But then you see the price and you say, oh, look, it's only $30. But just to back up how you're feeling about this purchase, you start reading reviews, and maybe you even start shopping for an alternative product, just so you can prove to yourself that you've tried to find it cheaper somewhere else. And then you buy it, and it makes you happy because you did the work, you tried to search for another deal, and never mind the fact that before you even went on Instagram, you never even thought of owning this product to begin with. But you know, has anybody ever dealt with this? Or maybe it's just me. Or how about the Target effect? You know, you walk into Target to buy shampoo and toilet paper. But then you walk out with a cart full of items and your bill's $200 for some reason. So what happened? You know, this is what I call the Target effect. Each time you hear yourself saying, oh, it's only $10. Oh, you know, it's only $20. Oh, it's only $30. Whatever the case is, you got to be aware that this is probably happening a lot of times over the course of a month. So yeah, $10 isn't really that much. But if you're saying this 20 times in a month, that's $200 that you're spending on things you probably really didn't even need. So mind the small expenses. And okay, so I always feel really excited when I'm shopping on Amazon because it's the best feeling. You get home, you see this box in the front of your door, and you begin to open it, and you see the product that you purchased just yesterday or 2 days ago. It's the best feeling in the world. This is what we call dopamine, and it's awesome. So we feel happy, but you know, do you ever feel a little bit of regret after making that purchase? Do you ever feel just a little bit of shame for having bought something you knew you probably didn't really need? Well, let me blow your minds. Canceling an Amazon order is, in fact, possible. So just because you got that text on your phone or an email that says your shipment is on the way, it doesn't mean that you can't cancel it. And guess what? It feels just as good. When you return something and you get money back, it feels pretty amazing. So my wife spent $100 on some curtain stuff that, in my opinion, we didn't really need. And it was sitting on our kitchen nook or whatever it's called for about 45 days collecting dust. And they just sat there, you know, and I mean, we're both busy. She's a teacher. We have an 8-month-old at home, and you know, we just don't have time to go back to Target and return the items, sit in line for however long it takes. But you know what? I ended up making the time. I stood in line for 3 minutes, and I returned the curtains. And get this, the store employee was actually happy to take them. I mean, seriously, she was happy to give me my money back. I mean, she had a smile on her face as she was giving me my money back. And it felt great. I walked out of there like I had just reached some kind of a new level on a video game, like accomplishment. So just because you completed an order and you thought it was a mistake, it doesn't mean that you can't fix it. Just cancel it. Correcting a mistake feels just as good as buying something. And you know, if you try it, I promise you it'll make you feel good. A couple of tools, if you're business owners, consider using a bookkeeper. This is very helpful. If you are just getting started in budgeting and you don't have a lot of time, use something like mint.com. It's a good way to set budgets. Just keep in mind you're going to be dealing with a little bit of having to constantly resync your bank accounts into the program. That happens often. Also, it's not really 100% realistic because mint.com assumes that your budget stays the same every month. There's going to be some expenses that you have one month and other expenses where you don't. For example, your car registration. You don't pay a car registration every month. And just because it costs you $240 a year doesn't mean that you should include $20 in your budget every month. That just doesn't make sense. And so YNAB, YNAB.com, I recently learned about it, I think is an excellent program for those people who really need help getting their budget in order. No matter where you are, I don't care if you make $3,000 a month or $30,000 a month, you can benefit from YNAB. Believe me, I have clients who've used it and I take their word for it. So, you know, there's a free version in the beginning and then you have to pay a subscription fee. But essentially, the way it allows you to assign a job to every single dollar. So let's say you make $5,000. You have to assign a job for each dollar. So you're going to spend everything. Of course, some of it is going to go to savings. Some of it is going to go to other expenses. But you do this every single month. Some months you might make more than others because maybe you took some days off or whatever. So you budget per month. And I think it's a great way of becoming more aware of your finances. And the more aware you are of your finances and cash flow, money coming in and money coming out, the healthier, the stronger you're going to be. Okay. And of course, there's also some financial advisors. Some of them can help you in this area. There's a lot that don't really focus on just budgeting, but just realize that that may be an option for you as well. Let's talk about debt management. So when it comes to paying off debt, I mostly always, generally speaking, recommend paying off the debt with the highest interest rate first. There's wisdom in doing things differently, but for the most part, pay off the debt with the highest interest rate. So here's what I want you to do. Make a list of all of your debts, find out what the interest rates are, what the minimum payments are, and I want you to pay as much as you possibly can into one debt, the one debt that has the highest interest rate, and pay the minimum on all the rest. You heard me right. I said pay the minimum on all your other debts. And this goes contrary to what we all believe because we think we need to pay as much as we can on all the debt that we have. But once you pay that high interest rate debt off, you then take all of that money that you were applying towards that high interest rate debt and you apply it towards the next balance and the next one. And you keep repeating that cycle. And then you just repeat it until all the debt is paid off. So let's say you have 3 credit cards and the minimum payment for all 3 credit cards is $50. And on top of that, you can afford to pay an extra $500 towards all of your debt. So you can pay the $150 in credit cards plus an additional $150. So what I'm telling you is pick one of those cards and pay $550 in that card and pay $50 on all of the rest. And then once that card is paid off, you're then going to pay $600 towards the second card. And then once that's paid off, you're then going to spend $650 to the third card. So this is what I call the snowball effect. 9 times out of 10, when we do this strategy, we can pay off debt significantly faster than what you thought. I've had clients that thought it was going to take them 10 years to pay off their debt. We paid it off in 2 or 3. So use this method. Student debt. So there's different types of loans. If you have private loans, you need to find out what that loan means. If it's interest only, you're going to feel pretty devastated if you find out 10 years later that the $15,000, for example, you paid towards that loan did absolutely nothing to the principal. So you want to find out, am I paying principal or is this an interest-only loan? some of you might have non-private loans, government loans, that allow you to pay as you earn. So the more money you make, the higher the payment. The less money you make, the lower the payment. This is really helpful for those people who just graduated and they're finding it difficult to get on their feet right away. For those of you working in the public sector, some of these loans are actually forgivable if you work for the public sector for maybe 10 or 20 years, depending on the loan and depending on the conditions. The point I'm trying to make is find out about your loan. You don't want to run the risk of finding out some bad news 10 years later. You can also look into refinancing or consolidating. There's a lot of loans out there that are really a basket or a package of small individual loans with different balances, minimum payments, different interest charges, but they're all kind of grouped up into this one large loan, even though they're all individual. So find out how much interest you're paying on each of those loans and average it out, and determine if you could benefit from refinancing or consolidating some of your debt. There's some banking institutions that offer very low interest rate. SoFi, First Republic are just a few. Your payments might be a little bit higher, but you're going to be paying off your debt a lot faster. And of course, if you have student debt that is forgivable because you work in a public job, you may not really benefit from refinancing. I'm okay paying interest only as long as the debt is forgivable. But if it's not forgivable, like for the most of us, you should think about whether refinancing or consolidating makes sense to you. One last point.
Oh, we had one question. What is principal?
Yes. Principal is, so if I take out a loan of, let's say, $20,000, that's the principal. It's the outstanding debt that is on the loan. If 10 years go by and you paid interest only and the debt is still $20,000, that's horrible. So what you want to have happen is every time you make a payment, that $20,000 goes down, down, down. It may take a while, but eventually you want to get it to zero. So principal is the outstanding balance of the loan. And by the way, some of these loans can actually increase in value. This happened to my wife, and this is a completely other story that I could talk to you guys about, but we don't have time to talk about that. But be careful if you're not structuring these properly, your loans can actually grow over time. And that's not a good thing. The last point I wanted to make is that some of you have loans that are not forgivable if you die. So consider buying life insurance. If you have a $100,000 student loan and it's not forgivable if you die, and you're relatively good health and you're young, term life insurance is very cheap. You could probably be paying somewhere between $15 and $30 a month for a term policy, and it covers your debt. Credit cards. It's very important to not use credit cards as an emergency fund. Oftentimes, people find themselves in a tough place. I remember my college days. There was a time where I had $20 in my checking account, and I needed to buy groceries, and I also needed gas for my car. And I made a mistake. I used my credit card. And well, why did I do it? Well, because I didn't have the money to pay for it myself. So I get that emergencies happen, but you got to pretend like the credit card really doesn't exist. So I mean, what would you really do if you didn't have a credit card? Would you starve? Would I have starved? Probably not. I would have driven to my parents' house and had dinner. You're going to figure something out. Just ask friends for help. Do something. But if you're serious about improving your finances, these are the kinds of sacrifices and commitments that you have to keep to yourself. Sometimes people have the right intentions, and they intend to pay credit cards before the bill becomes due. I mean, really, who wants to owe money, right? I don't think any of us want to owe money, and none of us want to pay interest. But what usually happens is people lose track of how much they spent, and they ended up using the money that was in their bank account that was supposed to pay off their credit card for other expenses. So by the time the bill comes around, they realize they have no money in their account to pay the credit cards. I need you to remember this. If there's anything you learn from today, credit cards are not loans. Loans typically charge interest rates of 0% to 8%, depending on your credit score. And they always almost always have a term to pay it off. A term meaning it's a 3-year loan, or it's a 5-year loan, or if you have a mortgage, it's a 15 or 30-year loan. There's a term of when it's supposed to get paid off. Credit cards charge 17 to 25%, and they don't have a payoff date. So you could be paying it for years and years and years and years to come. So don't think of it as a loan. If you're in a position where you constantly have a balance on your credit card, I've been there when I was in college, you should focus on paying it off first. Just stop using it. Don't cancel it, but just stop using it. Once you pay it off and you decide to use it again, I recommend paying it off as you use it. So for example, let's say you spent $80 in a day using your credit card. I want you to go online at the end of that day or in the morning while you're doing your business, go on your phone and make an $80 payment to your credit card. I mean, you would have used your own money, right? Instead, you decided to use your credit card, but it wasn't your money. So then pay it off right away is what I'm saying. And by the way, this will limit how much you're actually going to spend, because now you're going to be thinking twice every time you use your credit card. Before, you were just thinking, well, great, I'll use my credit card to spend $100. You know, that really just means that it's going to cost me $5 per month. I can afford $5 per month. No, that's not how you want to think about this. So now you're going to be thinking, shoot, well, I don't want to spend $100 out of my own money. And this is where you want to be. Think of it this way. Let's say that you go out to dinner with your friends and one of them decides to pick up the bill and they ask everyone to Venmo them. Did you spend your money? No. You still have the money in your account. So then why do you automatically know that the $40, for example, you owe your friend is no longer your money? How soon do you pay your friend back? Usually within a day, right? I mean, do any of you have a friend that just buys everything for you and they never expect for you to pay them back ever, for anything ever? I don't think any of us have that. And that's essentially what we do with our credit cards. Think of your credit card as your friend that pays for stuff, but they expect you to Venmo them immediately. This friend isn't as nice, by the way. They're going to charge you interest if you don't pay them. And it's not cheap. So think of it like Venmo. If you spend $20 with your credit card, Venmo, quote unquote, your credit card right away. And you really should only be using credit cards for 2 reasons, in my opinion. You're either trying to build credit, which is a valid reason, or you travel a lot and you want to accrue miles, or you like the cash back for money you spend. Either way, just don't carry a balance. Do not use it as an emergency fund. Some employer benefits. We'll talk about 401ks. This year, the maximum that you can contribute to a 401k is $19,500. And if you're over the age of 50, there's an additional $6,500 that you could contribute to your 401k. By the way, 403bs are very similar. 457s are very similar. So depending on the job that you have, you may have access to one of these. If you're still paying off debt, I'd generally suggest that you contribute at least what they're matching. So if they match 3% of your income, so if you make $100,000 and you put in 3%, $3,000, they're going to throw in an additional 3% or $3,000 on your behalf. So that's $6,000. That's what we call free money. This also helps you save money in taxes. So let's say you make $100,000 in a year and you put in $10,000 into a pre-tax 401k. But essentially what that means is that originally, if you didn't put the money into the 401k, you'd pay taxes as if you earned $100,000. But if you earn $100,000, you put $10,000 into a pre-tax 401k, you're now getting taxed as if you only earned $90,000. So it's not that you saved $10,000 in taxes, you decreased your taxable income, therefore lowering your tax bill. And there's other ways you could contribute, Roth or after-tax contributions that we can discuss at another time. There's other accounts. If you're a solo attorney, you don't work for a company, you can contribute to a SEP IRA or a solo 401k. There are things that you can do. There's also HSAs. Some employers offer it, some don't. But you can really only access it if you have a high deductible health savings account. The beauty of these are that you can contribute money pre-tax, so it helps you save money in taxes, and you can use it for health expenses down the road. So if you have a family, the maximum you could put into them is a little over $7,000 a year. So it's pre-tax, you get a tax deduction. And when you need to use it for medical expenses, it's tax-free. You don't have to pay any taxes on the money that you use as long as it's for medical expenses. So what I would do is put as much money as you can while you're working, and then when you retire, you have a big bucket of money that you could use, by the way, at a time where medical expenses are probably going to be at their highest. So take advantage of that. There's flexible spending accounts. They're not my favorite. You have to use the money before the end of the year. Just know that they exist. And that's another way for you to save taxes and also pay for medical expenses. So about retirement, when should you start? The answer is an overwhelming now. Time is going to be your biggest friend. If you could save anything at all, I want you to start that now. Using a 401k could help you save money in taxes and save for retirement at the same time. The average Social Security check in 2011 was $1,100 per month. Today, it's about $1,300 per month. In 30 years, it's expected to be about $2,500 per month. And that's in future dollars. How many of you can live on $2,500 a month today? Probably not a lot. So pay your future self. How much should you contribute? The most common excuse that I hear is, you know, I barely have enough money to survive. I can't afford to save anything right now. And this is true for some people, but many of us can make changes to our spending, and we can afford to save even at least $20 per month. We can save something. So you don't have to start saving $100 per month or even $50 per month. Just start with what you can afford. The longer you wait, the more money you lose because you have less time for your money to compound. So what I'm telling you is that every day, every month, and every year you wait to save, it's going to cost you more and more money. You could literally lose hundreds, if not millions of dollars just by waiting a couple of years. So let me explain. I'm going to give you an example, and keep in mind that this is hypothetical. The people and the numbers that I use in this example are hypothetical, and your situation might be different. So let me introduce two people, Maria and Peter. And I have a few minutes here, so I'm going to try to go through this quickly. Maria and Peter, they're both 25 years old today. They both finished school, and they both began identical jobs, making identical incomes. Maria decides she's going to start saving now at 25. Peter decides he's going to focus more on paying off debt and traveling and living life, and he's going to start saving more, or just start saving when he starts to make more money down the line. So Peter doesn't start to save until he's actually 35 years old. So he waits 10 years. Maria starts now. Peter starts 10 years from now at age 35. So what does Maria do? She starts to save $5,000 per year every year until she's 65 years old. She saved $200,000 over 40 years. And she earned an average of 8% on her hypothetical investment. When Peter turned 35, he then starts to save money. But he doesn't save $5,000 like Maria. He starts to save $10,000 per year every single year until he's 65 years old. Peter saved $300,000, $100,000 more than Maria over the 30 years, and he earned the same exact rate of return as Maria, 8%. How much money did they end up with? And can you guess who ended up with more? Maria ended up with $1.4 million. Peter ended up with $1.2 million. So Maria has $200,000 more than Peter, and she saved $100,000 less. So when you factor that in, she actually has $300,000 more than Peter. So in other words, because Peter waited 10 years, he lost $300,000. And by the way, if Peter saved $5,000 instead of $10,000 at the age of 35, he would have only have had $610,000 in his account. So that's almost $1 million that he would have lost. So this is the power of compound interest. I don't need you to understand exactly how compound interest works. I just need you to know that it exists and start taking advantage of it. But Miguel, what if I can't keep up with the saving? What if next year I can't afford to save as much? Well, then just stop. Take a break. There's no rules of when you can stop. What I'm telling you is start now, and if you can't do it later on, you can pause it and continue at another point. Real briefly, I did want to discuss some of the benefits of CalBar Connect. Our firm has worked with CalBar Connect for benefits for over 40 years, and we have about 12,000 attorneys as clients and roughly 1,200 judges as clients. Long-term disability is probably something you all need to pay attention to. So if I asked you what your largest asset is, if you own a home, you'd probably be thinking about your house, or maybe an expensive car, or a diamond ring, or some kind of material thing. But for most of us, unless you're ultra rich, your largest financial asset is likely to be your ability to earn an income. So think about it. If you made $150,000 and you're 35 years old and you expect to retire at age 35, you would have made over close to $7 million by the time you hit 65. And this is accounting for inflation, of course. So that's a huge asset. So, think of it this way also. If you owned an ATM machine, if you were in the business of owning ATM machines, wouldn't you buy insurance on that ATM machine in case it gets vandalized or it broke or, something happened to it? So, in this example, you are in fact kind of like an ATM machine. You produce money. If you lost the ability to work due to some kind of an illness or disability, this could have catastrophic consequences to your finances. So there's a 25% chance that one of you on this phone call is going to have some kind of a disabling condition lasting at least 1 year before you retire. So through the State Bar, there are some discounts available. I myself am available to provide some of these. If you have any questions on them, you can contact me individually. But you can also go to the website AINPS, find out a little bit more about it. There's other benefits that I'm not going over that are at calbarconnect.com. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Chris, and hopefully we can answer some questions.
Yes, excellent. This has been really, really insightful and helpful. And we have a couple questions. So let me just dig right in. How much should you contribute to retirement if you're also trying to save money for a large investment like a house?
That's a really good question. And oftentimes, I know people always want an exact answer, but unfortunately, it goes back to it depends. But let me do this. It goes back to having a budget. So if you work out a budget, you have your income, your expenses, and you find out you have a surplus of, let's say, $500. So after all of your basic expenses, not including savings or anything like that, just all of your expenses, you have $500 left over that you could budget. So the question is, how much of this $500 should I be putting towards retirement? Well, it really depends on your goals. And so what I would do is I would list out your goals and say, I want to retire at this age. I want to buy a house in these many years. How much money do I need for my retirement? How much money do I need for my house? And then back into those numbers. It's difficult to do on your own, and that's where financial advisors come into action, where they can help you figure that out. But you might find out that, I need $3 million by the time I retire, which means that if I saved, it's not this number, but if I saved $300 for 35 years per month, $300 per month, then I'll get to my number. So then you'll say, all right, I'm going to set aside $300 towards my retirement, and everything else is going towards the house. So essentially, you're creating buckets of different goals, and you're depositing money into those buckets and filling them up based off of those priorities. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yes, I think it does also. Another question. I'm a little confused about your recommendation to not use a credit card unless it is to build credit. So for regular expenses, groceries, soap, coffee, are you recommending that we do not use our credit card for those and instead withdraw cash and use that?
Yeah. So if you're not trying to build credit, very few of us do not care about that. But if you're one of the few who, you don't really care about your credit score, you're not planning on ever buying a house or making a big purchase. You also don't really care about cash back on credit cards. You don't travel a lot, so you don't need the miles. Then there really isn't a reason for you to really own a credit card. Because all a credit card does essentially is, it's like that example I used with the Venmo. It's like having your friend pay for it and then you're paying them back. There's no point to it. So, but what I'm also saying is that most of us do have a reason to use a credit card. For me personally, I use it because I get points, and the more money that I spend on it, the more points I get. But I'm careful in knowing that I'm only spending what I can afford. So if in my budget it shows that I'm going to be spending $2,000 on shopping, let's just say, well, if I'm already spending that, I'm just going to use my credit card so I get the points, but I'm paying it off right away. So I hope that makes sense.
The next question, do you have any books or financial resources you recommend to learn more about our finances and be more fiscally responsible?
Yes, there are some books. I'm blanking on some of the names now, but I can tell you I've co-authored a couple of books. They're called, one of them is called You Are Not Alone, Recipes for Success by Students for Students. And that came out this year. It's, if you Google that title, You Are Not Alone, Recipes for Success by Students for Students, by Velasquez Press. I think it's on sale for $10. I don't receive any of the proceeds. This all goes to a nonprofit. And it doesn't just talk about finances, but I go into a lot more detail on some of these topics. But then there's also other books. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I think, is a good one that everybody, I think, should read. Yeah.
Thank you. Miguel, are you familiar with public interest loan forgiveness or public service loan forgiveness?
Yeah, so I kind of was, I was talking about that a little bit earlier. Essentially,
let me finish the question. I just wanted to make sure you had some familiarity. So if you have public interest loan forgiveness, should you still try and pay down your debts? Seems like a waste of money if it will get forgiven in 10 years, but also scary to accumulate without paying down.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really depends. Most often, I'm going to say, don't really rush on paying it off. You're better off just paying the interest and having it being forgiven. There was a case, I had a client, they had significant amount of money in debt. I mean, very, very significant, husband and wife, and they both make a substantial amount of income as well. So what we ended up doing was we did the math and we figured they could pay the debt off and still pay less money than they would have paid in interest. So what we did was we started paying interest only on the loan because that's all that was required. And we started putting money aside in a different bucket that was earning interest, a conservative interest of something like 5 or 6%. And the goal is that once this account is built up to what the balance is, we're going to liquidate that amount and pay off the loan. That worked out for them, but it's not going to work out for everybody. So it really depends on your situation.
Next question. When you save enough money to make a down payment on a house, would the interest in the mortgage add up over time more than what you could pay for it in cash? In other words, should we just try to save enough to buy a house in full instead of getting a mortgage?
That's a fair question. I like that one because, yeah, that's creative. So, no, I don't think you should buy a house in cash unless you have, here, if the house is going to cost you $500,000, you better have $2 million in cash. There are benefits of having some debt. There's good debt and bad debt. as the way tax laws are right now is if you have a mortgage of $750,000, you can write off some of that interest. So it actually does help you tax-wise to have a little bit of debt. Also, not a lot of people have $500,000 or even $1 million to pay for a house. So I don't think that you should buy it all at once, leverage debt. But what I do think you should do is when you do buy a house, most of us are always just looking at what the monthly payment is going to be. You have to realize there's going to be property taxes, insurance, but even on top of that, there's going to be other expenses. Like when you move in, you might want to paint the house, you might want to change the carpets. So even though you just paid $50,000 for a down payment, you won't know this until you move in, but after you move in, there's another $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of additional expenses that you never even thought about until you moved in. So what I'm saying is, if you have an emergency fund account, if you have $50,000 and that's all you have, don't put all of that towards the house. You got to have enough money for the down payment and still have enough money for emergency funds. And that's the right way of buying a house.
I think we've reached the end of our questions. So Miguel, do you have any closing wisdom for us?
No, I want to just thank you all for participating. Chris, thank you for inviting me. It was an honor to speak to all of you. Again, I hope that you took away at least one idea. It would make me feel great if you feel like it. You can email me at mdelgado@dwassociates.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. But if you want to email me or message me and just tell me the one thing that you got out of today, that'll make me feel good. I just want to know that you walked away with at least one good idea that you could apply in your own life. And of course, if you have any questions about your situation, I'd be happy to help.
Well, thank you again so much. We will make the slides and the recording and your contact information available for all of the participants today. And I personally learned a lot. You know, the idea that credit cards are not loans. I think of them sometimes like that, but you're spelling it out that way was a good reminder. And, you know, overall, I think the underlying theme for me is that knowledge is power. So use this knowledge that you have gained and go and be powerful in this area of your life. I want to thank Helena and Miguel for their time and insights today. And as soon as we end this webinar, you will all receive a SurveyMonkey evaluation. So please tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, and what you'd like to see next. This topic on financial literacy was identified because our ChangeLawyers alumni told us what is important. So tell us more of what you'd like to see in March and April. Meanwhile, we have one more upcoming webinar already scheduled on February 20th on mindfulness with Maria Simonson. So I hope to see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you all for joining us today, and this concludes our webinar.